Welcome to Our Next Existence by Katie and the Chorus. I'm Katie, former technology strategist turned reluctant spiritual medium, and I channel messages from the Chorus, a group of beings just beyond our sensory perceptions who are loving, expansive, and who greatly enjoy sharing their perspective of us. Join us each week as we share and discuss their ideas about humanity's existence, purpose, and future. Concepts you can draw from to accelerate your path, expand your perceptions, and ultimately step into the flow of the universe and your life. Welcome back, everybody. In this phase of waiting for the bus stop or ripping off the Band-Aid, as we discussed in last week's episode, I've been trying to figure out the drainage around my house. And there's this one downspout that's like the downspout to nowhere. I've been digging this trench to try and see where it comes out, and I can't find it. I'm pretty sure I will have dug my way to Mexico by the time I figure out where this pipe ends. It's not that bad, but it feels that bad when you're digging. Digging is just, you're sure you've been at it for days and you've only gone like 2 feet. Well, depending on the soil. And I feel like every tree in Florida somehow got their roots into this one diagonal trench I am digging across my yard. And it got me thinking about time and distance, of course, and conviction. It's been a topic for me this week as I've gone through some perhaps unsettling things. My son was suffering from a pretty bad respiratory something, and we ended up in the ER and spent a couple days in the hospital. And he's doing much better now, but it was a little uncertain for a period of time while we were getting x-rays back and blood tests back and things like that. It was unknown what was happening. And as I was sitting there in the hospital room next to his bed each night, I was aware of the possibility of something like the Chorus, but I was very much engrossed in what was going on from my five senses perspective. It's a feeling that's followed me a lot this summer. I'm aware of so much more. I'm aware of the Chorus or the Federation or the mountains or ancient civilizations or messages that I get from all sorts of beings. I believe in the possibility of these other civilizations and times and ways of existence. But sometimes when you're sitting next to someone that you love very deeply in a hospital bed, those things aren't quite reachable. Now, I might have said applicable, but I would imagine that they have views on illness here that might even be helpful in the moment. But sometimes there's enough going on in our belief systems that we can't allow for that just yet. We're opening more and more to the benefits of newness, but we're coming from a place where every aspect of our resonance believed that new things were risky, and therefore in high-risk situations, we were unlikely to try out the new thing unless we were really painted into a corner or forced, or there was some aspect of the new thing that connected to something that we already trusted from our existing context, which would then sort of lessen the newness of the new thing. And even after all my years of channeling and everything I've been through, I could sit there and recognize that if I could open to the Chorus in that moment, they probably would say something very loving, but they also might say something that felt not true. Like they might say it's all working out perfectly. And sure, it probably was. I could see that. He would probably be all right. This would probably expand us in countless ways. But that also is not completely true to the five senses part of me that doesn't want to be sick, that doesn't want to see others suffer, and that certainly still has a fear of dying. It's comforting at times to hear the chorus's perspective, that they see our souls as these infinite things, and they see us in all the timelines that we're popping up across and all the places that we go, and I love sensing that in them. But it is just a perspective. The way our view that life is here and life ends is a perspective, but this is the perspective that I am conscious within. So through this experience, I started thinking about something that we humans typically crave, which is certainty. Perhaps we don't need certainty in every aspect or every second of our lives, but when we are coming to a decision, and when we are finished contemplating it, and when we have made a choice, we like to know that the choice that we made is the one that is going to lead us to the outcome that we hoped for. But the more the infinite database of the universe comes through to us, becomes apparent, the more you see that really any number of ways of doing it could work out for optimal happiness or satisfaction. The more difficult it feels as a human to be certain of anything. My certainty as a five senses human is based on an idea of how things will play out in action, in things that I'll hear or taste or touch. If we give him this medicine, he will cough less. If I take that job, I will be happier and enjoy my days more. Our mental projections carry out the idea of those actions as a way of almost enveloping us in that warm cocoon of certainty. We can see how it would play out. We can see what it would be like. We know that we're on the road to this thing. But if I lay down in front of you 1,000 roads that would lead to some version of that same five senses sensation, in some ways, the roads themselves may start to feel a little bit meaningless to a human. Face to face with our narrow idea of certainty in this way, where 1,000 different options are giving us a very similar sensation. From the human perspective, expanding outward, from the five senses perspective, expanding outward into that infinite database, we may start to feel a sense of, what does it matter then? Which of these 1,000 roads I take? Certainty goes out the window. Sure, we could be certain that those 1,000 roads will somehow lead us in the direction of that sense of healing or happiness or joy or whatever it is that we're looking for. But it's not really what certainty is for a human, is it? It's that the choice of the path, of the method, of getting there is the best of all choices. And when that singularity is put into question in any aspect of our reality, the conviction that we used to feel wanes. I sat there in that hospital room and I somehow knew in some part of me that everything was going to be okay. And I didn't just mean it in a chorus version where it's like, oh, your soul can go anywhere and it's all expansion. I meant it for myself in a five senses way that he was going to get better in this lifetime, in that week, and better in a way that a human mom would define it. A happy, healthy kid running around again. I knew that somewhere inside of me as I sat there, and that part of me was not worried in the least. But there was still another part of me that wanted to know the exact steps in the dance. Should we say yes to that drug? Should we stay up all night and watch him? Should we go home tomorrow or stay another day for observation? It was almost like there was a part of me that was certain in the outcome, an outcome that was somewhere between maybe the chorus is pie in the sky, you're an infinite being, and my maybe very, 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 very specific idea of an outcome of how we would leave the hospital and what it would look like. I'd let go of all that. I've let go of a lot of things from my human perspective. So I was somewhere in the in-between of like, it's all right, he's going to get better. But then that other part of me was sort of like, well, then what does it matter? What does it matter if you stand up or stay or get him that food or don't? There may be times in awakening where we are all brought face to face with the seeming meaninglessness of an action. What does it matter if I get up and go to work today? What does it matter if I call that person? What does it matter if I plant those flowers in my front yard? Especially when we can feel the immense arrival of either this wave of creation or who knows what other waves we may be feeling. When we are deeply in touch with an energetic sense of immense change, we may start to shift into a place where our five senses actions feel so small that it practically doesn't seem worthwhile even to make them. And that is because we are coming from the place, those beliefs, where those actions were all and everything that dictated the outcome. If you worked hard, if you showed up, if you stayed consistent, that had an effect on the outcome. If you were lazy, if you didn't do it, if you didn't follow up, that had an effect on the outcome. But part of expanding into our energetic tools is realizing the impact of energetic decisions and interactions. And as we do so, our previous version of conviction and of certainty will be altered. And through that transition period, in this part of awakening, we may all come to these junctures of feeling more of all those energies, feeling with that greater part of ourself that somehow already knows how it's all going to play out, while the other part of us is left to wonder if it even matters if we get up out of bed. Earlier this season, I briefly touched on material wellness. And again, it could seem like one of those passing remarks about, oh yeah, enjoy your life. But this actually has a lot to do with distance. Let me explain. And I'm very glad I'm about to explain this because I've been waiting to hear myself say this explanation for a whole freaking week. Says the five senses part of me to the larger energetic part of me that somehow gets all mashed inside of one body and comes out into a microphone. But anyway. So in the material world, we had, by some views, a very, 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 very narrow definition of distance. There are many ways to look at how humanity created its version of distance, so this is not at all the only way of looking at it. But by this one perspective that says that our version of distance was very, 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 very narrow, we took basically the vastness of the universe and cut it all out of our perspective, dropped everything down into what we could see on visible wavelengths of light or hear on, the sounds of our typical human hearing. Distance became defined by the lengths that these sensory perceptions could perceive. We have a lot of jokes sometimes as a culture, as a civilization, about babies. When babies see and hear a person in the room, they're very happy. And when the person walks out of the room, they start to cry because by their view, that person is gone. Now, they don't know that the person just went into the kitchen and is still in the house and is about to come back with their snack cup. They are fully present in their sensory perceptions, and all else beyond that fades. Now, there are some views that children are also still at times very in touch with energetic aspects of themselves, and so may be able to perceive the ones that they love in other ways. And That's a big topic and maybe not one we're going to try and answer here. We're just using sort of an example of humans as we all go through this. Because remember, according to the chorus, there's a lot of similarities between us and infants. We see the difference of a lifetime and they're like, you're in the same game. You're even in the same room. You're like slightly different versions of each other. So by some views, we have a lot of similarities between our grown-up selves and our infant selves. And by some of our views, no, children are very different than grown-ups. So either way, whatever way you take it. Okay, so you could say that other civilizations looked at the grown-up versions of us in a very similar way as how we look at our infants, where if we didn't see it, if we didn't hear it, we basically didn't think it existed anymore. Distance was not something that we could span in many other ways. Now, as humanity continued to awaken or continued on this path towards awakening, we manifested a variety of technological solutions that extended the reach of these sensory perceptions. So we now have video calling and we have the Wi-Fi and internet, and we can hear someone from the other side of the world. Now, you could say that that's technology, that's not actually humanity, but depending upon how you look at a being and how they manifest things, they're one and the same. So we humans are generating these manifestations. These manifestations are extending the reach of our sensory perceptions in a way that makes sense to us. Okay, now this example is probably making some sense, but now let's talk about things that we're starting to feel. Distances that we're starting to feel across. You could put these things in a slightly different category than 5 senses, sensory perceptions, and interpretations of distance. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you and your partner are having a fight and you're really in disagreement about something and have been for maybe a week or two, a prolonged period of time. That person may be in the same room as you, sitting on the couch next to you, but you or that person may feel a distance, meaning even though you can see them with your eyes and hear them with your ears and have a conversation with them, you will sense that there are parts of them that they are protecting or shielding or holding back from sharing. Maybe it's the unsaid words about how they're feeling. Maybe it's just other things that now they don't feel comfortable sharing with you because of this other disagreement. So you can see how we're expanding in some ways along a continuum. We are seeing the person, talking to the person, but we are also recognizing in these manifestations a reflection of an energetic distance that has occurred. Now, if we were to go back to the infant, if the infant could feel mom or dad as they left the room, they may not necessarily cry. They may wait with anticipation with their eyes, staring at the doorway, waiting for that person to return. But their ongoing sense of the person would continue, assuming, of course, that mom or dad wasn't pissed when they left the room and wasn't holding back parts of themselves. But assuming everything's fine, they just went into the other room to get the snack cup, there would not be necessarily a felt change in the distance other than an acknowledgement that they are passing out of the extent of the visible wavelengths of light, which the stronger the energetic sense of the person becomes, the less we would feel a loss based on the visible wavelengths alone. I'm going to say that last part a slightly different way because I know we're flying through these a little bit. So right now, our perception of our reality is based upon what we perceive with these senses. So when I see you walk away, I feel things because my feelings have often been driven by my interactions with my unified field of perception, my mind and body, with this environment. So when you walk away and you disappear, my self interprets that energy. And my knowingness that something has been interpreted is I get an emotional response. Maybe I'm super glad to see you walk away. Maybe I'm really sad to see you walk away. but I am reading the energies that I am able to read, which previously had been simply what we were able to see and hear. Now, however, our energetic field is expanding. So I am reading the energies that I can see and hear and sense. And so when I sense you walk away, but I can still sense you as the person, as close as if you were still next to me on the couch, my perception, my overall field of perception will inform my emotions, and I will not feel a loss because now I have something in addition to seeing and hearing. I can sense you. And so my emotions might be much more calm. They might be much more okay with your departure because I still sense you. And the distance is not as great as it once was. You might even say telepathy is a good example of this, which is like a mind-based communication over distances. And that's true. But we're going to set telepathy to the side for a second, and we're going to focus more on the sense of energy perception. These are slightly different, and we'll get into why and how they're different down the road. But for now, let's just stay with the sense of someone. You don't actually have to hear them telepathically from the next room say, do you want a cup of tea too, in order to still feel them, right? We can still feel a person, feel their energy. They keep coming up for us, or we're really consistently wondering how they're doing. All of that is a type of energetic connection over distance. So in this example, if you and I are in a room and I walk out of the room and you can still sense me, what is your sense of conviction doing? Has it wavered? Does it even know that there's anything to have conviction about? Or is it sort of this smooth continuum of talking to Katie? Katie goes into the other room to get a cup of tea. I still feel her. She's still around. She's preoccupied getting the tea. And then she comes back into the room. Your sense of me, your energetic sense of me could be considered relatively steady through that whole experience. So if I said to you, did you have conviction that I was going to come back into the room? You might have said, well, I guess I didn't really think about it. Well, I mean, I guess so, because on the five senses wavelengths, I knew you were going to get tea and you're going to bring me back a cup of tea. So I guess I did have conviction, but also I just felt you the whole time. I mean, you could have wandered into the garage and I still would have felt you. And this is a good illustration of the difference between conviction in a five senses context, which is based on the outcome of an action. Conviction would have to do with these tiny forks in the road in which the five senses wants to know what five senses action will be taken next and how will that work out. Whereas the energetic part of you is maybe less concerned with which room of the house that I'm in, because your energetic perception of me is continuous, is steady, is unbroken. There's nothing to be in conviction about because there is no fork, there is no question, and there is no need to know how that will work out because there is no opening where that sense of connection was broken in order to know when it would return. Let's take this example a little bit more out there into imagination. So let's say you and I can fly. Let's say it's a beautiful starry night and we both want to go for a fly. I don't know what people say when they can fly. We both want to go for a soar. I don't know. We both want to go for a float in anti-gravity, however you want to put it. So we don't have spaceships or anything. It's just you and me. We can fly. Ta-da. And we both shoot up into the air and we're flying over the ocean to start. And then I sort of veer off towards Greenland and Iceland in the north because I really want to see the way that the moon shines on the snow. And you sense this in me. And you sense that I'm going there. Now, I pass out of your visible wavelengths of light potentially very quickly because maybe I'm a very fast soarer. So at that intersection, there would be a question on the five senses version of you of where's she going, right? If you were the infant in the room and I now start, going over the horizon towards Iceland, you would want to know what happened. Where was the change? But if you and I were energetically connected, it would sort of be potentially less of a question which direction I was heading in, because you and I both see each other on those frequencies, if that makes sense. Maybe it's like a different kind of seeing each other, but you and I are still on the same playground. So I veer off to the north and you veer off to the south because you want to see the moonlight on palm trees or whatever happens. And you and I spend the whole evening flying all over the world, never really feeling disconnected, even though the span of distance is that much greater. I mean, you could say simply, you and I can see now each other, even when we're really, 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 really far apart, by a previous definition of distance. So let's go back to the hospital room. There was a part of me that could see my son, even though I knew for a period of time he was flying off to Iceland. I didn't know what he was doing in that hospital bed. Same way I didn't know what you would do when you fly over to Iceland to see the moon on the snow, but I knew it was a part of his path. He was benefiting from it. He was infinite and loved and cared for. He signed up for this crazy experience. The doctors were so nice. The nurses were on top of it. There was so much to be grateful for in the experience. I could see him over a further distance. I was more cognizant than ever of that kind of conviction. That calm, easy certainty that isn't responding to a crisis because it does not sense a crisis. There is no fork in the road where something is being lost, where something new must be decided or reclaimed. And as strange as it is, it just knew that every part of this was going to work out, even though I couldn't tell you when we would leave the hospital. It is a different kind of certainty. It's not the kind that I'm used to from the five senses perspective, where if you said, Katie, how do you know that's the right decision? And I could argue all of my five senses reasons, what I've read in journal studies, what the doctor said, friends I've talked to who've done this before, the history of these medical choices. I understand that world because I am coming from it. And I used to be really good at those things, analyzing and figuring out answers, and had really good reasons for the answers that I stood by. And that is a flavor of certainty and conviction in this amazingly vast, incredible, and diverse universe. But an equally amazing version of conviction is one in which those chasms of unknown are bridged, where you and I won't look at each other and ask each other, what are all the reasons why we should jump that way to make it across into this unknown? Rather, it's an expanded sense of energy where we continue to feel each other as we cross those unknowns. The connection becomes the guiding light. And whatever things are on the path become sort of a reflection of that light. It's not the kind of conviction you argue for. It's the kind of thing that you feel and expand into. You can choose to cast yourself through it and outward into it and reach others. This is a new type of existence. Blending sort of this old version of the arguing, analytical, mental aspect of us that would be so sure of itself. And this new version of us that knows that anything can happen at any point in time, no matter how we thought it would go. And yet you can still know that that was the right direction to take. Is it meaningless that I am now digging a trench into the ocean, trying to find where this downspout daylights? You could say so. If I'm expanding into some amazing energetic version of Katie where I could potentially vibrate into a different reality where you don't even need downspouts, what does it matter? The possibilities in the universe are endless. This infinite database is so infinite. How do I even know that I need to dig this trench right now, at this juncture in my awakening when so much is unknown and bearing down on me? I don't. I don't have a list of things I could have done today, and I did not pick which one would be the most efficient or the most effective or the thing that most needed to be done. I cannot argue with conviction for these actions that I'm taking because these actions were not selected by my mind. It just felt like the right thing to do. Mostly because right now I'm flying over the whole planet with this other energetic part of me that's feeling so much. And maybe I'm in a ditch, and maybe I'm in Iceland, and maybe I'm under a palm tree. But I feel more than what we see with our eyes. I was doing more than digging a ditch there today. The same way that you are doing more than going to your job, getting responsibilities done, fixing up your yard, checking on friends, scrolling on social media, or any of the human things that might at times in this process feel meaningless. They are not. But they are also no longer the entirety of your meaning in your life. You are and have been much more. And now you are awakening through a conscious process of experiencing all of these sensations to all of that much more. That you are beyond these frequencies where all we did was see and hear and touch and taste. And the more we allow for the gorgeous and incredible simplicity that we created in this reality, the more we'll see the vastness of everything that we are beyond it. And the more we will come to love and experience through all aspects of what we are. Because even though you and I can fly anywhere that we like, it sure is fun to feel the wind on our faces, isn't it? We love you infinitely. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found these messages to be helpful. May they accelerate you on your path wherever you'd like it to go. For more information on the books which correspond to these podcast seasons, our podcast, live events, or how to get in touch with us, visit katieandthechorus.com. Thanks again. See you next time.